To counter Voiceless Voice, you generally want to use your Imperm and Veiler on low, because it negates both her search effect and her being treated as full material for a ritual summon. Same for Frame Gear Gamma, you'll want to use it on low, and ideally you want to save Ash Blossom for Saphira, but only if you didn't see them search Skull Guardian. Otherwise Ash is useless really, however. If their first summon was Skull Guardian using low from hand, then just use any hand trap on Skull Guardian before low revives itself and Skull Guardian gets an Omni Negate. You can also use Bestials on Saphira, since this prevents them from ritual summoning, or use it on low if it's attempting to revive itself and they haven't activated Saphira yet. As for Call by the Grave, save it for Saphira if it's their turn and you went first. Or you can just use it on low if she's attempting to revive itself after they've already ritual summoned. The deck isn't too bothered by Duel since many hands can play right through it. Evenly Matched isn't very useful since Skull Guardian can just negate it. Nibiru is useless since they usually only summon 3 times. And even if they summon more, then Skull Guardian can just negate it. Shifter is incredibly good against Voiceless Voice since it basically prevents Saphira from activating and also prevents low from reviving itself. As for Pendulum Magicians or any Pendulum deck, save your Imperm and Veiler for Electromite, since you negate both the search and the draw one. Same for Frame Gear Gamma. As for Ash Blossom, it really depends on what deck they're playing and how many cards in hand. But using it on Beyond the Pendulum is generally good. Most Pendulum decks go through their whole deck turn 1, so Duel is always good. Nibiru can end their turn if used in the right moment. Make sure to use it when you see they have enough materials to make Appaloosa or Baran. Evenly Matched will often be negated by Baran. As for Shifter, there's a weird ruling. When Shifter is activated, Pendulum cards get banished instead of going to the extra deck face up, making Shifter extremely good against Pendulum as well. Next we have Snake Eyes Fire King. You'll want to use your Ash Blossom on original Sinful Spoils if they started the duel with Diabellster or by normal summoning Ash. This will either end their combo or cut them off from their Fire King engine. You'll also want to use your Veiler or Imperm on Snake Eye Ash. It's a high risk high reward situation because they can dodge the negate with Kirin. But worth the risk in my opinion. You'll want to use Gamma on Snake Eye Ash as well. The deck doesn't lose to Duel because they can just do full Snake Eyes combo without searching. A really good counter against this deck is using a Bestial. Use it to banish Masquerena from their grave. This makes the deck a lot weaker. As for the high impact hand traps, Dimension Shifter should completely stop the deck from making combos, so do use it if your deck can afford it. Snake Eyes Fire King does not lose to Nibiru. The deck has great anti-Nibiru combos. It also doesn't lose to Evenly Matched, but it depends on the end board. If the end board is Arvada and Amblohale, they can keep Whale and pop it with a Kirin in hand to trigger Whale to revive Masquerena. But Evenly Matched is still good to use versus this deck in my opinion. Onto Yubel. For a high risk high reward situation, you'll want to use your Ash Blossom on D-Lotus. But if they have gates, then they can discard Spirit to revive Spirit. So a safer Ash for me is using it on Nightmare Pain. This prevents both the search and the destruction of Spirit. As for Imperm and Veiler, it's the same situation where an Imperm and Veiler on D-Lotus is high risk but also high reward. But if you want to be safer, use them on Spirit of Yubel. Gamma should ideally be used on D-Lotus as well, because if you use it on Spirit, Spirit will summon a Yubel from deck. The deck might struggle if you use Duel, but they should still end on 5 to 6 disruptions, making Duel situationally good against Yubel depending on their hand. If you have a Bestial, you have to use it on the first Yubel monster that hits the grave, before they summon Phantom of Yubel, or if you negated D-Lotus, and they're trying to revive it with gates, you can banish that with a Bestial instead. As for the big impact hand traps, Nibiru does nothing against this deck because they usually summon a Phantom before their 5th summon to negate. Evenly Matched is sometimes good, only if they already used Yama's Grave effect. Otherwise they keep Appaloosa, then Yama revives Soul of Rage and they'll still have 6 disruptions. As for Shifter, this should also completely stop their turn 1 or make them end on 1 to 2 disruptions. Next we have Reacue Ace. You'll want to use your Ash Blossom generally on original Sinful Spoils if that's what they open with. Or if they open with Airlifter to search Emergency, then you should use your Ash Blossom on Emergency. As for Imperm and Veiler, the ideal target is Turbulence, but they generally make Little Knight to protect Turbulence, so instead, you'll want to use your Imperm and Veiler to prevent them from searching Turbulence. So if they summon Airlifter, that's usually a good negate because otherwise they can search for emergency to dodge your targeted negates. You should also know that you can't target Hydrant if they have another Reacue Ace on field. So if they're activating Hydrant, while they have no other monsters, this generally tells you they don't have another Reacue Ace to summon. So you can use your Imperm or Veiler on that instead. The deck isn't affected by Duel because Turbulence sets from deck. As for Gamma, you want to save it for Turbulence, because Little Knight can't protect. As for Nibiru, it is sometimes good. If they started the combo with Diabellster or Poplar, then Turbulence is usually their 5th or 6th summon. Shifter can sometimes be good depending on their hand, but they should still resolve Turbulence even under Shifter, making it not very good against Reacue Ace. As for Evenly Matched, it'll win you the game against Reacue Ace. They have no negate for it, and their disruptions are usually tied to many different cards. As for Branded, everyone knows to save Ash Blossom for Branded Fusion, no matter how many bait cards they activate before Branded Fusion. As for Imperm or Veiler, use it on a Lubber, because you're either preventing them from searching Branded Fusion, or if they have Branded Fusion in hand, then you're preventing them from searching Branded Lost, which makes your Imperm and Veiler useless anyway. Same thing for Gamma. Use it on a Lubber, but sometimes they might try to search Branded Fusion without a Lubber, using Grangwignall. So you can Imperm or Veiler Cartesia when it activates to fuse. Or if they have Retribution in Grave, you can Imperm or Veiler Guiding Quem if they normal summon it after they have Retribution in Grave. Droll does not hurt the deck because their first summon is usually for Branded Fusion. Or they can just grab Branded Fusion from Grave. Bestial can be used on Fallen of Albaz after they activate Branded Fusion, completely disrupting their fusion plays, but only do this if they only have one Albaz in Grave. Nibiru isn't very useful against Branded, since you'll be sending their Albion to Grave as well, which can set Banishment to revive Mirajade. Shifter also isn't very good, but it depends on the hand. If they have a Lubber, then Shifter didn't do much. If they have to summon Cartesia, then Shifter will banish the Branded Fusion so they can't grab it from Grave. Evenly Matched is extremely good against Branded. They have no negate for it, and should only have 1 or 2 disruptions after you use Evenly. If you play against Tearlaments, you'll want to save all of Ash Blossom, Imperm, and Veiler for their Kitkalos. Using Imperm and Veiler on Kitkalos negates both its effects, so it is more ideal. It is slightly affected by Droll as you can't search with whatever you mill with Kitkalos' effect. The deck does get hurt a lot by Bestials or DD Crows, so make sure to use them on either Havnus or Skyren. Tearlaments often gets Relkalos out to negate Nibiru before the 5th summon, so Nibiru is usually not good enough. And since Tearlaments can summon Baran and search Tearlaments' Crime, they'll often have a negate for your Evenly Matched. But the deck does auto-lose to Dimension Shifter since it heavily relies on the graveyard. As for Purrely, you'll want to save your Ash Blossom for my friend Purrely. As for Imperm and Veiler, if they don't have Stray Street, always save them for Purrely. If they do have Stray Street, then Imperm and Veiler are useless, so just use them on whatever they normal summon. Always use Gamma on Purrely as well. As for Droll, it does turn off my friend Purrely, because they usually search it with Purrely first. You can also use DD Crow for when they activate Purrely targeting a spell in Grave. DD Crow can banish that spell before they Xyz summon, but to counter their unaffected boss monster, you can use Herald of the Abyss to send it to Grave, or Kurakara to tribute it, or just Underworld Goddess to link using it, or simply a Kaiju. You can also use Triple Tactics talent to take control of it after it spins once, then just link it away. Purrely generally summon twice during their turn, so Nibiru is useless. Evenly as well doesn't do much because they can choose to just keep their unaffected boss monster. But the deck generally struggles against Shifter since it can't Xyz with a spell in Grave if everything is banished. As for Labrynth, you always save your Ash Blossom for their Big Welcome Labrynth. However, if it is your turn and they have both Welcome and Big Welcome set, then you should use Ash on whatever they activate first, since if they summon Lovely first with Welcome, it'll make it so you can't respond to Big Welcome with your Ash Blossom. As for Imperm and Veiler, you can generally use it on Ariana when they normal summon, in hope of not letting them activate Big Welcome on turn 1, or if you want to play it safer, you can save it for Lovely. But by then they'll have recovered their furniture cards, so I recommend using Imperm and Veiler on Ariana. Same for Gamma. use it on Ariana since they can chain block the lovely. The deck doesn't care about Duel. They only search once per turn anyway, and the furniture set cards directly from deck instead of searching. Labrynth doesn't care about Nibiru because they almost never summon 5 times a turn. They can also play under Shifter sometimes because Ariana can just directly search Big Welcome. But the deck struggles a lot against evenly matched since they usually have no negates for it. Next is Kashtira. You'll want to save Ash Blossom for Theosis. As for Valor, it's generally good to save it for Rise Heart, since if Rise Heart doesn't banish, they can't summon a Rise Heart with just one card. As for your Imperm, I always recommend to save it for your turn, and then just use it on a Rise Heart. This is usually enough to win the duel versus Kashtira. As for Gamma, I also suggest saving it for your turn. You'll need to activate any spell first, then it gets banished instead of going to grave. A Rise Heart activates to equip it as material. Gamma then negates. You can also hard counter Kashtira the same way with Triple Tactics talent. Bait a Rise Heart to activate, then take control of it. Duel can sometimes hurt the deck, depending on if they have Rise Heart in hand or not. As for Nibiru, it's also usually useful, because while Kashtira can summon a Rise Heart in 4 summons, most players go for the more greedy play which ends on a Rise Heart plus Fenrir and Shangra, making that field very vulnerable to Nibiru. Evenly matched isn't usually good against Kashtira because they can choose to just keep a Rise Heart on field. Kashtira doesn't care about Shifter, so much so that play it themselves. Against Centurion, you'll want to use your Ash Blossom on Primera, because that's generally the only chance you get to use your Ash. As for Imperm and Valor, definitely use them on Oxala since it not only searches but also places Centurion monsters back on field from grave in the end phase. You also generally use your Gamma on Primera since it gets rid of their tuner. Centurion isn't too affected by Duel. It'll only be preventing one search. It also doesn't care about Nibiru since they don't summon 5 times a turn. Evenly matched usually breaks their entire field, but they might have a negate for it if they chose to synchro early during your turn. As for Shifter, the deck plays well under it since Oxala can bring back Centurion monsters even from the banished zone. Against Mathmech, if they don't start with Circular, you can use Ash, Imperm, and Valor on Alambear to prevent them from searching Circular. And even if they do start the duel with Circular, you'll still want to negate Alambear to prevent them from searching Diameter. But if you do have multiple negates, then make sure to negate both Circular and Alambear. This cuts access to both Circular hopefully and Super Factorial. The deck does struggle against Nibiru since it doesn't put up a negate. Turn 1, however, it will have negates for your evenly matched next turn, and it struggles to play under Shifter since Mage and Transcode Talker can't revive. Super Factorial is dead and Terahertz can't send cards to grave. Now for Floowandereeze. Now this isn't really a meta deck but it's annoying to play against, so you'll want to use your Ash Blossom on Eglin, since it prevents them searching Impem. So if they have the field spell in hand they'll still struggle. As for Imperm and Valor, you can just use on Rabena, since anything that stops one effect against Floowandereeze will usually stop the entire normal summoning chain. Frame Gear Gamma should also be used on Rabena, but if they chain block it then you can just use it on Eglin instead. The deck usually loses to Duel since cards like Rabena and Eglin must search to also extra normal summon. Nibiru is useless since Flo don't summon 5 times. Evenly matched isn't very good since they can set up Avian to negate it, and they play Shifter themselves so it won't do anything against Floowandereeze. Subscribe if this video helped.